Now, from Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the SANDTON Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, this is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all good podcast platforms. I'm Alexander Leibner and this is edition 124. It's week 30 of 2023 and we're over the July hump and I'm excited to be with you once more. If you would like to send through your questions, your comments, your feedback, you can do so using the email address editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @SANDTON Times, or you can visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And if you're listening live on Mix 93.8 and not on the podcast at a later stage, well, the WhatsApp line is open on 0848 220938, 0848 220938, and you can send through messages like this one from Sebastian last week.
The original version would have sufficed. You didn't have to ruin it even more and make people hate the song even more with the remix.
Well, hate's a bit of a strong word, but I think that was with reference to Aqua's Barbie Girl that we played last week. I think we've recovered from that, though, subsequently. A special warm welcome to everyone listening in Johannesburg and Pretoria, across South Africa or anywhere else in the world, online or on air. Wherever you are, I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandtonland. I'm joined once more by my man behind the mixing desk, Vincenzo. Good to see you again. And here we are, another week of the SANDTON Times Hour. It's been an interesting week that has passed, though. I must tell you, Vincenzo, I had a chance to visit the Heineken factory in Sedibeng, which is there on the way to the Vaal. If you've ever driven past there, you have that very distinctive beer smell in the air when you hit the highway. And I got to see how Heineken Silver is made and packaged and distributed. Very interesting. It's a massive operation and quite remarkable. That's all happening in our backyard. And I'm exhausted. I had to wear safety boots, the reflective vest, the glasses, the whole lot. I mean, anyone who's in manufacturing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And those boots are not, they're not for sissies. I was pretty knackered after walking around an entire factory from start to finish. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Then I also had the pleasure of emceeing the Digital Transformation Summit at the Sandton Convention Center, which was another interesting day out. And I guess the months leading up to the December break or the December end of year are certainly going to be busy or get busier when it comes to hosting awards, gala dinners, and corporate conferences. But I'm ready for it. Bring it on. Coming up on this week's show, ever been bullied or been called a bully? Well, my first guest sheds a light on the rise of bullying at school and also in the workplace with some fascinating discoveries. You don't want to miss this conversation. Then Sandton's oldest bar has received a makeover, and with so much history, I catch up with the general manager to chat about the new space. More coming up on that. Then after that, one of our regular voices is back on the show to chat about Zimbabwean millionaires making it big around the world. And finally, I wrap up the hour with one of our favorite comedians who's heading to Sandton with a brand new show. This and more is coming up shortly. There are no headlines this week, but let's dive headfirst into the week's show with a bit of music. It's Lawrence Semeka with All Night to the Sun right here on the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8.
Promote your brand. Advertise your business.
Our audience could be your next client. Contact the SANDTON Times today. The best of talk and music in 1 hour. This is the SANDTON Times Hour.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and also available on all good podcast platforms wherever you get these in the world, as well as Amazon Music and AfriPods of late, which is really exciting. Well, as we kick off this week's hour, I'm thrilled to be joined by the author of a very interesting book. She's authored quite a few books, but she's also got a very dynamic background in media, journalism, and her name is Marion Scher. She's written a book called Big Bully, An Epidemic of Unkindness. And Marion, as we get things going and ease into this conversation, give me a bit of an idea as what the inspiration was behind this book, Big Bully.
Well, the inspiration behind it came from a book that I wrote in 2001 that was published in 2001. And in that book, Surfacing, we had 11 stories from 11 different people of their lived experiences with mental health. And so many of those stories mentioned bullying and how bullying had almost triggered off many of their mental health issues. And of course, you can't live in today's day and age without being aware of social media bullying. It's such a big thing. So, yeah, I decided that no one else had written a book on it, especially addressing adult issues as well. That's why I did the book.
Well, it is a big topic. I'm sure there's a lot of parents who can talk about bullying in their kids' lives. But also the book uncovers stories of bullies in very different settings, not just schools, but also workplaces and at home. And what are some of the impactful stories that you came across when you were researching this book?
Gosh, there were quite a number. One of them, if I start with the teens, to give you a small example, with teenagers or kids and bullying today, because of screens, you hide a bully, can come out and punch someone and they're a bully. But, when they hide behind screens, it's very insidious. And I heard of a young girl of 11 who, this sounds crazy, but she'd actually sent nude photos to her boyfriend, which sounds insane. And of course, 11 years old, hello, they break up. And he goes on to send them out to all his friends. And you can imagine the devastating effect on her life. She is now labeled a slut, and that's it. How she knows she's going to get after those. I had many like that. In terms of adult bullying, some of them are quite creepy. One is actually a former colleague of mine who moved into a new development, a townhouse block, and this guy pops up and says, greeted her and said, "I'm your neighbor." And they were both moving in. He said, "Would you like to go out for a coffee?" And she thought nothing of it, and she goes out for a coffee with him. The next thing, as she's coming home from work a few days later, she sees a message pop up on her phone and starts saying, "Oh, you look very nice today. I like that," whatever she was wearing. And this got creepier and creepier to the point where she went to the police and eventually she had to move out of the block. Whereas before social media, she probably could have closed the door. I don't know if it had got creepier than that. There are just so many in emotional bullying. Another one that really got me was because we all, we hear of so-and-so in a bad relationship and we think, oh, why did they stay? Why didn't they get out of it? There's so many reasons. And the one started a relationship that started at school. A boy and a girl at school went to university, and her first sign was when she went to university in Grahamstown, he went to university in Johannesburg. When she got there, he said, he's going to phone her at the same time, say 8 o'clock every night. It was, in fact, 8 o'clock. There was a reason for that. And the reason was that he knew that if he phoned at 8 o'clock, she couldn't go jolling with her friends. She had to be in that phone box waiting for his call. And to cut a long story short, they did get married. They had 2 children. And this control, it stopped her following the career she had wanted, because he said, I want you to be at home for our children, and so on and so on. It took an awful lot for her to get up and finally walk out that door. And that was so similar to so many other stories I did. And then in the workplace, perhaps some of the most insidious stories. For instance, very briefly, someone that you work on a presentation and you come up with all these great ideas and you walk in a meeting only to see one of your colleagues has presented all your ideas before you. And that's another kind of bullying. Or in the case of this person actually had a black colleague, and they were horrified because the boss had said to this black colleague, "What language do you speak at home?" And this person said, "Well, English." "Oh, yes, but what other languages do you speak?" It's, of course, that's very much racist as well as bullying.
Sure, it's unbelievable.
So I could go on and on.
Yeah, it just illustrates how the technology and the online environment has just aided in amplifying bullying from maybe what we remember bullying be when we were at school. But now having this technology and having these devices that can now sort of just take this to a whole new level just makes the entire thing unbelievably frightening. Now, Marion, also just to contextualize this for people, you're not a psychologist, you're not somebody who comes from a medical background, but you come from a media and journalistic background, and you must have sought the advice of experts to give you maybe a little bit of insight or more layers to analyzing some of these situations. And what are some of the advice that these experts gave you in terms of dealing with bullying and kind of where it's at?
Well, first of all, thank you. Yes, I always make a point of letting people know I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or any type of mental health professional. I work very closely with SADAG, who are a wonderful organization. If there's anyone listening and this resonates with many of these stories, SADAG's always available to listen. South African Depression and Anxiety Group. And they're always very helpful finding me the right experts. And of course, I've been writing on mental health for 29 years. So yes, I indeed do have experts. Also, I'd like to say that the book would never have happened without Lundbeck. You know, people always have a go at pharmaceuticals, but they were absolutely amazing and backed me all the way. And in terms of what psychologists say, in all the books I do, at the end of each chapter, I do try and give tips. It also helps that my own daughter is a clinical psychologist. That was quite a good thing too. But the sort of advice they give is very much that your children, for instance, or your teens, they must be comfortable enough to open up to you, or there should be people in schools. I mean, I know schools have school counselors, but the children I spoke to, young adults, they don't feel that's any good. They feel if they go there, nothing happens, nothing changes. And I think more than what professionals say, I think in terms of teenagers, the schools and the parents, there's no interaction or very little. That needs to change. In terms of relationships, I think it's a very good idea, professionals, and they're not just looking for work, because believe me, psychologists and psychiatrists are fully booked up. But what they say is, you know, that obviously therapy, not so much you need a psychiatrist and be put on medication, but therapy definitely helps relate. You know, and there's psychologists fall under so many various it's a very broad spectrum. So you would find someone, for instance, as an expert on relationships. You could phone SADAG and ask them. They'll tell you exactly where do you live. Okay, we've got somebody in your area that would be a good person for you. It is about talking to someone and getting help. There's no one size fits all answer. I can't give you an answer on what would stop a bully bullying. What I can say is if it's, for instance, in the workplace, what an HR executive told me was, and this was very interesting. Well, he's more than an HR. He's got a PhD in this topic, and Dr. Ruane Koch. And he says, one thing's important, because a lot of this kind of thing in a workplace is he said, she said.
Yeah.
Keep a record of every single incident. This is for the workplace, you know, write it all down. I suppose that works in any bullying scenario. So I can't really, you know, off the top of my head, think of anything specific that they, you know, it's not tick boxes that you do, but it definitely is not keeping it inside, because if you keep it all inside, psychologically, it's definitely going to do great damage.
Yeah. Well, interesting that you're talking about HR departments. I believe one of the other interesting findings that you had, because most people say, well, if you could have an issue in the workplace, you know, go to HR and they're going to sort it all out for you. Is it very often that HR is not necessarily always playing on the side of the employees?
I don't know about not necessarily always. I didn't find any instance where they helped. Really, to me, Alexandra, it looks as though HR very much are there for the bosses, not for the employees. And as someone pointed out to me the other day, well, the bosses pay them. So, yeah, no, I did not find HR was there for their employees.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Almost sounds like it needs sort of a King 3 real think as to how, you know, boards and CEOs and executive teams report and interact. It almost feels like HR needs to have its very own sort of King 3 format, where it sort of is removed from the business to an extent that it can work on both sides, both the employees and the boss's side. But I suppose that's another conversation for a whole nother day, and probably the question is, you know, in whose interest would that be? But back to your book, how would you say you can identify potential bullies? Because I suppose there's the people who are being bullied, but then there's the bullies themselves, and there's probably a lot of parents listening and saying, well, you know, my child isn't a bully.
I'm so pleased you brought that up, because I think that was one thing I really would have loved to have found, would be someone that came forward and said, I am a bully. I had one young man did come forward, because Westerford High School, I really want to give a shout out to them in the Cape. They've been absolutely fantastic. They were the only school out of a dozen or so emails I sent out requesting help from schools on this. They're the only ones that came back to me. They're a brilliant high school in Cape Town. And one lad in a group that I spoke to, he turned around and said he had bullied somebody on social media, and it actually had backfired on him. And he'd lost a lot of friends through it. He was a very good-looking young man. He probably was, looking at him, one of these people, very confident. And he'd been a bit of a hero, I think, before. But after this, which is unusual, people turned against him. Now, how do you identify a bully? Gosh, that's very difficult, because I think you can't always identify them until they're actually bullying. So what can happen, for instance, I had one story in the book with a young woman who said when she was at school as a teenager and sort of almost matric, she had a friend and she thought this is her best friend. But the minute she'd wanted to be with other friends, this friend said, well, I won't go out with you if you see them. That's a kind of bullying. But at the same time, that was her best friend. I think that's a very subtle bullying. I think, how do you tell a bully in the workplace? It's very difficult because, funny enough, we've all had bullying incidents. And I was told a story about an editor that I'd worked with many, many years ago. And this woman made this other employee's life a misery. But to me, she'd been fine. So identifying them, it's quite difficult. What I would like to say, you mentioned parents, and I think one of the biggest things I hope comes out of this book is parents look at their children more objectively and say, is my child a bully? And that can be looking at your child and seeing if he leaves people out of things. Because, just not inviting someone to a party these days, those kids are going to go online and see, oh, everybody else was at whatever it was. I wasn't invited. That's bullying.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I'm also just talking about the workplace as well, where in many instances people will say, well, he's an effective manager, or she's just, a strict boss, so she just does that. That's her style of doing things. But I'm sure you and I could spend probably the next hour talking about people that we've worked with or the people that we've dealt with, where we can say for certain that every interaction or every engagement with a particular manager or a particular person was for sure not just an assertive person. It was really somebody who was, I don't know, on a completely different strain.
Yeah, it's very difficult because even in the workplace, one of the things that came out when I said to people they'd been bullied very badly, and I said, well, why didn't you just leave? People are scared to lose their jobs today. That's a big issue. So people would rather hang on. But it is, someone said to me that they feel maybe when I said women can be much worse than men in terms of bullying in the workplace. And they said, well, women have got to maybe prove themselves, show they're tougher because, women bosses, not everybody is used to having a woman boss. So if you're a woman boss, have you got to be tougher? Have you got to be seen to be, bossier? It's a difficult one. But women definitely, I found, maybe it was just the stories I did, some of them were really awful and they take terrible advantage of the employees. If they say, oh, well, I need you to do this, this, and this. So suddenly your 8-hour day becomes a 12-hour day. Are you going to say anything?
Yeah.
Are you too scared?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? And I think a lot of people are probably either nodding their heads, listening to this, reflecting on maybe some situations that they've been in. But to kind of end this on some sort of high note, I mean, the subtext to this book is called An Epidemic of Unkindness. And I'm assuming there's also a call for people to become kinder in the workplace, at home, and at school.
#BeKind. My publisher's Bookstorm came up with that, #BeKind. It's such simple things. For instance, I was at the gym the other day, and because of the weather, the window had misted up where I was in the gym. And a big burly chap, weightlifting type, he drew a heart into the steam. And I thought, oh, that's really nice. And I did #BeKind. And I thought, I wonder if somebody will see that and take it on. And for me, what that means is you're at the till paying at Pick and Pay or Checkers or wherever you're buying your goods. Just say please and thank you. If you watch other people, and anyone listening to this, do this. Watch other people, see how few actually say please and thank you. Another thing, if you're a waiter or waitress, somebody will sit at a table and they just hold up their hand and say, oh, can I have a Coke? Bring another Coke here or whatever. Not, oh, sorry, please, when you've got a minute, do you think you could bring me another Coke? And I think the thing is they're setting those examples for their children. So a big issue is, are child bullies? Are they child bullies because their parents are bullies? And I have seen that a number of times, that absolutely does happen.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation, and if you want to delve more into this topic, well, go pick up a copy of Big Bully, An Epidemic of Unkindness. I've been chatting to Marion Scher. She's the author of this book and has been doing some very interesting research into the space of bullying and bullies, especially now with technology being such an enabler of people who are bullies, and they can now amplify that into a totally different space. But I think the one big takeaway is also, can we be kinder in a world that's become ever challenging and ever more tense? Marion, I thank you so much for making the time to be on the SANDTON Times Hour. It's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more of the SANDTON Times Hour right after this.
Get up, show up, and level up. Make the move and join Virgin Active. You'll score a gym bag, July free, plus activate a world of rewards. Discovery Vitality members get even more. Get started. Call 0860 Get Fit or visit your nearest club. Bag big rewards. virginactive.co.za. T's and C's apply.
Back for more?
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 with Milk and Sugar featuring John Paul Young and Lovers in the Air. Taking you to the second half of the Sandton Times Hour. My name is Alexander Leibner, and you know how this works. If there's anything that sounded good on the show and you didn't get all the details or you wanted to find out a bit more, well, you can visit the show notes on sandtontimes.co.za for a detailed breakdown of everything discussed on this week's edition. Also, be sure to check out the social media accounts at Sandton Times and feel free to engage. Send a tweet, a voice note, a DM, whatever works for you. And you can also use the hashtag Sandton Times Hour. Now, the Lord's Bar at the Protea Hotel by Marriott Balalaika Sandton has undergone an extensive 2 million rand renovation to mark its 74th year of existence. It's also one of the first bars in Sandton known as the Heritage Bar of the hotel and holds a very significant historical space in the Sandton landscape. I caught up with the Balalaika Hotel's general manager, Natalie Botha, on the occasion of the new Lord's Bar opening and kicked off our chat by asking her about the history of the bar and the hotel.
So the hotel was established in 1949. Actually, there's so much heritage. Next year, this hotel is 75 years old, or parts of it. The original part of the hotel was actually Lord's Bar. So part of the original building in 1949 was Lord's Bar. And the great thing about Lord's Bar is it was the first bar in Sandton to ever allow females into the bar. Go women power there. The hotel itself has grown throughout the years. Originally in 1949, it was actually, in the 40s, it was actually a watering hole for horses. And then thereafter, it slowly became a full-on hotel. It started with 30 rooms and a thatched roof and a cobblestone with Lord's Bar. And then slowly and surely became like the biggest place to hang out in the 80s. And then after that, we added on 150 rooms and became Balalaika. We've always been with Protea for the whole period. And then later on, in about 1995, just before the World Cup, we added on Crown Court. So we're now 330 bedroom hotel with lots to offer. We have 3 bars, 2 restaurants, plenty of venue space, etc. The conferencing came on. In 2020, I decided to take COVID as a great opportunity. It's when I came on board. And I took COVID as an opportunity to actually refurbish the hotel. So we started bit by bit. The last on the list was actually Lord's Bar because it had so much heritage behind it.
Well, we're going to get into that shortly because I want to quickly just rewind for a few sentences. When you were talking about the Balalaika, and a lot of people are looking at it now and saying, but what are you talking about? It's in the middle of the city. It's opposite the JSE. Like, you're talking about horses. You're talking about all these things. But the Balalaika used to be like an island between Johannesburg and Pretoria. I mean, there was nothing. Then there was the Balalaika. And then there was nothing again until you got to Pretoria, right?
Yeah, that's true. Literally, it was a watering hole for horses right in the beginning in the 1940s. And then eventually an English owner started the Balalaika. And that's why there's a lot of actually English names throughout the hotel, like our conference rooms are actually named Cambridge, Oxford. And then we have Lord's Bar. Balalaika was in the middle of nowhere. It was like a little island on its own. And then eventually became like a watering hole for people. Yeah. That's where everybody used to hang out. And then slowly but surely it grew to what it is today.
Well, let's talk about this watering hole for people, because that's one of the reasons why we're chatting. The Lord's Bar, which, like you said, is like a cornerstone of Sandton. A lot of people often don't even know about it because it's sort of hidden away in the hotel. A lot of people do know about it if they've been visiting it for many, many years. You've revamped it now. Tell us about the revamp. How did this all come about and what have you done?
I wanted to keep the authenticity of the whole place. We're not the minimalist kind of vibe where we are very much old English country. We've got great gardening, etc. So I wanted to keep that English old cigar lounge feeling with the revamp of Lord's Bar. And I wanted to keep some of the heritage in. So in Lord's Bar itself, the door has been fashioned to actually represent 10 Downing Street, kind of like as a montage to the English owner that originally bought the hotel. So instead of 10 Downing Street, we have 20 on our door. And instead of Lord of the Treasurer, we're Lord of Consumption. But the door itself is the axe, exact replica, except it's blue. Lord's Bar itself, inside the bar, we've tried to keep a lot of the history on the walls. So there's a lot of stuff of original meetings with, Julius Malema when he was part of ANC Youth League, and the first openings like in Sandton when JC opened, and a lot of those newspaper clippings we actually wanted to incorporate into the new revamp of Lord's Bar.
Let's go into some of the decor details. What have you changed? What have you kept? What can people expect when they walk into Lord's Bar?
We've changed quite a bit. We actually cordoned off the outside terrace now so that it's a little bit more private. We took out the tables and chairs and made it more with, lounge furniture. We changed the wood so that it's all blue. We changed the tiling, the carpet, the furniture, the lighting. We even changed the wallpaper on the roof to incorporate a little bit of age into it. I mean, we even went as far as staining the speakers with like a nicotine stain so that it actually incorporated. But at the same time, we still managed to keep a little bit of modernism into the actual bar itself by introducing, we've got a vape vending machine. We did glass tiles on the floor. So a lot of the things are old, to look old, but still very, very much new.
And then you've also done a menu. You've done a bit of a twist on the drinks. Tell us a little bit more about that.
We have our signatures. The guys do the apple aperitif. We want to do some of the old signature cocktails like the whiskey sours, etc., so that we can still keep within the whole fashion of Lord's Bar. But the menu itself is more of a snack menu. Chef and I came up with the menu ourselves. Chef is Chef Cabello. And the menu is very much in line with, we have a bit of vegan there for a tapas. And then we also have like little snacks and platters, etc., for normal guests to eat. So we've got like pop balls, deep fried pop balls with, infused with cheese and a chili jam, a chili tomato jam. We've got things like pulled lamb tacos. Good old favorite is rissoles. We just changed the stuffing. And plenty much more on the menu. You need to actually come check it out.
And what are you hoping to now do with the bar going forward? Have you got any interesting plans, any interesting ideas that you want to sort of activate in the space?
I would like to eventually start bringing back quiz nights. Quiz nights was actually so popular back in the 80s, 90s. They actually used to be these pub quiz nights, and I'm hoping to slowly introduce that. Right now, I'll start off with the launch, just make sure that my clients and my customers and my guests are happy. But eventually, I want to go back to introducing something like a quiz night, because I actually think that would be something different.
That's the Balalaika Hotels General Manager, Natalie Botha, on the occasion of the new Lord's Bar opening. And if you do go and check it out, let me give you a hot tip there. Make sure to order the hotel's legendary handmade kettle fried potato chips. So they actually make these potato chips from scratch at the hotel. They're unbelievably Moorish, beyond belief. And I've also tried to get them to sell me a packet, but no can do. You can only have them when you sit down and have a drink there at the Lord's Bar.
From Greater Sandton to the rest of the world, this is the SANTON Times Hour.
Haven't spoken to him in quite some time, but it's great to have him back on the hour. And Chris Bishop, journalist for African Business Magazine, it's so good to catch up with you again.
Yes, Alex, it's good to speak to you too.
Chris, coming to us all the way from England, but you are going to be talking African millionaires, as we've done many a times on this show. And one of those is social impact investor Nyasha Gwatitso. What's happening with her?
Well, yeah, I mean, both our case studies this week, they're also show how Zimbabweans, there's so many millions of them around the world. Obviously many left their country for economic reasons. They're all doing well. And Nyasha Gwatitso in particular, I mean, she grew up in the struggle in Zimbabwe. Both her parents were activists in the days when it was Rhodesia and fighting the liberation war. Her father helped to hustle President Robert Mugabe over the border in the back of his car to Mozambique in 1975. She says that she had breakfast with him when she was a kid and she didn't know who he was. And she didn't recognize him until he got elected as head of the country, which I thought was quite a nice one. But she came to England with her folks. Her folks, they worked on the railways in the UK while they were studying. The old man was a signalman and her mother worked in like a canteen at one of the stations. She studied there and she tried chemistry, didn't like it, dropped out. And then she started studying social work that she really liked and psychotherapy for abused and traumatized children, which turned out to be her calling in life. And what happened was she was working for Camden Council in London doing that very same thing. They had redundancies. They gave her 800 quid redundancy money. And we're talking, this is 1992.
Sure.
So she decided to look to see if she could open her own little small home for these children, if she was trained to do it. So she went to 54 addresses in London, nothing doing. The last one was owned by a vicar. Now, this vicar and his wife, it was their house, and they were living in a vicarage around the corner. They wanted to rent it out. So anyway, they asked for £2,500, and she didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. And then, oh, well, Shane goes away. And a week later, the vicar phoned up and said, look, I've spoken to my wife. Because of what you want to do, we're going to give it to you for we'll fit it out at our cost, and we'll give you 3 months rent-free to give you a chance to get it going. So she did. She went in there, and she even remembers the day in July 1992. And when the vicar came, he gave her the keys, and he even gave her like knives and forks to go in the house. And she, all of a sudden, she had 6 children in there. And these children, you got to understand, they're from, these were kids that were coming, unaccompanied minors who were turning up at airports and ports in the UK. Those days in conflict areas, particularly in Africa, families could save up their last $200 and put a child on a plane or a boat to England and hope someone would look after them at the other end. And these kids are turning up, and the councils and the authorities didn't know what to do with them. And they only had these big homes that were no good for these severely. I mean, some of these kids were child soldiers. Some of these kids were like terribly abused. You don't even want to know. And they were there. So basically, she had set up 6 children in this home, and then she had to get 25 to 30 professionals to look after them.
Yeah.
For 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And she had no money. So all she could pay these people was bus fare. And she said, look, I'll pay you in November. We start getting money. Anyway, it's amazing because the contracts came in thick and fast. As I say, the councils didn't know what to do. And in December that year, she was turning over £1 million.
She was.
Incredible. So she paid everybody. And then within 2 years, she set up 2 more. And then she developed into a chain, which now turns over something like £150 million.
Goodness me. And this is all sort of a social entrepreneurship story. I mean, it's doing something good whilst also sort of being sustainable.
And it's incredible what she's done. I mean, she's developed this whole network of these sort of homes and therapy centres. I mean, even now she's got a farm in Oxfordshire where children can go along, and the way they get therapies, they like feed and they look after animals and things, which is like apparently a new way of treating sort of severely traumatized children. Incredible. And she lives in Guernsey, and she still runs businesses on behalf of her family back in Zimbabwe. But yeah, she's a remarkable person.
Well, talking about remarkable people, and we're talking about Zimbabweans in this particular instance, who seem to be the most resilient and most innovative nation. And another Zimbabwean is Moya Apsgawa Lentil. Tell me about him.
Yeah, well, it's mainly left Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia as it was then, when he was about 18 years old. I think he was looking to, like a lot of young people at the time, to avoid military service in a war that was coming to an end anyway. And he went to London with a rucksack and £300. So that's all they were allowed out of the country at the time. And he stayed with relatives. He studied there. During some time, he pulled pints in London pubs. He painted and decorated, did labouring jobs. And one time when he was studying, he had this particularly large credit bill. So to pay it off, he went over to Switzerland. There was work going there. Got a job on a farm for 6 months. Just shoveling, cow dung, horse dung, whatever dung. And he worked there, managed to pay off. Eventually, he worked for PwC and got a posting to Australia, where his career really took off. It was time when the internet was coming. And he got in on the dot-com boom, him and a mate. He said, we were two men and a dog. He said, we had a company. He said, and we made a fortune, We made a fortune because no one knew the internet then. It was just starting off.
Yeah.
And we have made an absolute fortune on the internet. And it was so good that they were being approached by companies to sell. So they went over to Wall Street in New York, and they had two parallel, imagine this, companies trying to buy them out. At the same time, they had parallel meetings, these guys. And one of the guys, the companies, put in a legal case against them, accusing them of taking their technology, which they hadn't done. But the company said, no, we're just trying to stop you from, selling to someone else. So that didn't work. So eventually they sold over a weekend for $65 million, just the two of them.
Sure.
So what they were going to do, they were going to get equity in the company, passive income, plus they were going to get about $200,000 in cash. So they're happy. So they're back in Australia. He's bought a big car and all the rest of it. And then he said, you get up in the morning, you have a look at the computer and see you've made another $1 million overnight, because of the equity. And then comes the dot-com crash, bang. And the whole company collapsed. It lost its value overnight. He said, all we got left was $200,000. And that was it. Finished. And he said it was a real hard lesson in life. And then eventually he came back to Cape Town, where he is now. And he's got this Moya app thing now, which is basically data-free shopping. It's where you can go online and you can do anything you like. You can play games, you can gamble, I think, as well if you want, but you can buy stuff, you can, all these sort of things. And he's got something like 6 million people signed up for it. And you don't need data, which, as you know, in South Africa is a big shortage.
Wow.
But, yeah.
Incredible. Well, Chris Bishop, he's a journalist with African Business Magazine, catching up with him again, talking about Africa's business people and millionaires and how they've gone from success to failure and success once more. Chris, it's been great to chat to you on the SANDTON Times Hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more right after the break.
It's a good question because lots of people have asked us that, what are you going to do going forward?
That's a great question.
It's a critically important question.
Such a great and interesting question.
I have not even thought about that until you just said it.
You're listening to the SANDTON Times Hour.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 with Fats and Small turn around. And hopefully the winter turns around and we get back to warmer months. But something to warm us up, and he's back at the theatre on the square, is Nik Rabinowitz. He's got a new show to make us laugh and roll in the aisles. It's called Rambunctious, which is one of those delicious English words. I think it means uncontrollably exuberant. And then exuberance, another one of those words. So it's almost like you have to unpack this thing, like sort of Russian dolls. But here to chat to us about his new show is Nik Rabinowitz. Nik, it's good to chat to you again on the SANDTON Times Hour.
Alexander, it's good to see you again. It's always nice. You've got such an exuberant, rambunctious energy about you.
Well, Nik, thank you so much. Tell me a bit more about your show. I mean, last time you were doing a show in SANDTON, you had the most incredible marketing campaign lined up. I mean, it was full of extremism and all kinds of exciting things.
Yes, in fact, actually, I devote some of this show to discussing the incredible promotional impetus that a terrorist organization gave to the marketing campaign for my previous show. I don't know how I'm going to sell tickets for this one. I'm at a loss.
Well, listen, the usual person would probably boost their post on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and this show just got boosted on a totally different platform.
Yeah, it really blew up. I'll be discussing, if dear listener, you're not sure what I'm talking about. Last November, I was in Joburg, perfectly timed with an ISIS terrorist threat on Pride Parade, as well as allegedly me. I devote some time in this show to discussing these, what transpired there, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the topics you're going to be chatting about in this show. And I must say, I did watch your last show, and I think you rocked up on stage with a bulletproof vest, if I remember correctly. But you're also going to be chatting about your son's bar mitzvah. You're going to be chatting about, a whole range of different things. What can people expect from Rambunctious?
Well, I think the press release was something like, expect my how does that go? What is that word?
I think it was, is it unadulterated or highly anticipated?
I'm not sure what they mean, but basically I think it means I'll be coming back to the snowy wastes of Johannesburg. So, I talk about the ISIS thing. I talk about a recent tour I did overseas, many sort of events from my private life which is a problem because some of the people in my private life don't like being part of my public life. So I have to discuss that as well. Particularly my mom, I promised to leave her out.
Nik, give me an idea of what inspired this particular set of comedy for this particular show.
Kind of the same thing that inspires any show is kind of a collection of life experiences that you write down in notebooks and various places, and then try and cobble together to make a show. And it's kind of, you start off thinking, oh, this is awesome, and then you start thinking this is tricky, and then the third step of the creative process is this is shit, and then 4 is I am shit, and then 5 is this might be okay, and then 6 is this is awesome. That's how generally it goes.
And I mean, why do you always choose to come to the theatre on the square? I mean, is there something specific about Sandton that you enjoy doing your shows here as opposed to anywhere else?
I particularly enjoy that theatre. It's got this subterranean feel, these low ceilings, and it's intimate, which is very nice for comedy. It's one of my favorite rooms to do comedy in. And then it's kind of got this family feeling. Daphne's like my Joburg mom. And Nik, is everything all right? Are you okay? It's going to be wonderful. The audience, we've got the members in tonight. And
That's
so
definitely...
just remember they're all, they're quite ancient and they laugh on the inside. But you just bear in mind they are laughing, but just on the inside. And then actually she was amazing during this whole ISIS thing in November. When I got the news, I forwarded it to her. It was like a News 24 journalist who broke the story to me, and I sent it to her, and she sent me back a voice note going, Nik, you're such a scream, because she thought I had made the whole thing up for publicity purposes. So the team there are really cool. It's great for comedy, and I have a lot of history there.
Well, I mean, let's just touch on this, because I know we've spoken about this a bit now during this interview. I mean, this alleged attack or threat that you had on your show. I mean, was there at any point that you were worried about any of this actually being sort of legitimate? And did you have any people feeding back to you saying, listen, be careful, or did any sort of security cluster or police get involved to kind of guide you through what is not everyday sort of occurrence in South Africa?
Yeah, I had various people contacting me, like from Jewish intelligence, that was actually my mother-in-law, to like former Israeli counterintelligence operatives, to people offering me safe houses, to Japanese TV shows. I actually put all of this in this show. I was going to call it Terror Virgin, because that's actually what I told the Japanese TV show when they asked me if this was my first time being the target of a terrorist threat. I said, yes, I'm a terror virgin, but they didn't understand what I meant by that. But anyway, it was. I was actually, I was kind of too busy to really kind of take it all in. About a week into that show, I kind of had a minor panic attack where I thought, it's all calmed down. We had security, but we don't anymore. Maybe they're just waiting for tonight. I kind of clearly remember that feeling.
Yeah, it's when you're not looking.
A bulletproof vest isn't that effective when the venue's blown up by a bomb. So also, that wasn't going to work.
Well, listen, it looked impressive. It definitely set the tone, and I think I'd be quite interested to see how you tell this story and so many more in this new show, Rambunctious. It runs from the 25th of July to the 5th of August, so if you're keen to go and you're listening, hop onto CompuTicket. Tickets are 230 Rand. If there's 2 of you, it'll be 460, and you get to enjoy Nik Rabinowitz at the Theatre on the Square in Sandton. And Nik, it's always good to chat to you on the SANDTON Times Hour.
Thanks, my man.
And that's it for another SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8, and as always available on all leading podcast platforms. And like I said, now on Amazon Music and AfriPods. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @SANDTON Times and visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za for all the information that we chatted about this week and a whole bunch of other news and content. Feel free to send through your questions, your comments, your feedback, or your inputs. They're always welcome. And thank you to all my guests who made time to be on the show this week. And as always, Vincenzo, well, we got through this week, hopefully without any mistakes. And let's catch it up again next week when we do it all again. And thank you to the SANDTON Times team as well as everyone at Mix 93.8. And of course, you. Let's connect again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the SANDTON Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.